Hello, Tar Heel Nation. Welcome back to another episode of UNC Hoops Talk podcast. I am your host, Dan DeWitt, and a lot to talk about. Hopefully everybody had a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving. Obviously, we're thankful for the Tar Heels and thankful for the way they're playing coming off a Maui Championship. And before we get into everything, I wanted to just thank everybody that's been listening, anybody that's been sharing out the podcast. It's definitely been noticed, and definitely appreciated as well. So, just thank you to everybody out there supporting UNC Hoops Talk podcast. Bringing back a return member of the podcast in Blake from keepingitheel.com. Only been a month, but Blake, you're already in a new position there, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I've been with Keeping It Heel for a while now, just this year, but just recently made the move to editor, so a little bit more responsibility, a lot more articles. But we do a good job of trying to cover everything we can across all the sports. But certainly this is a time of year that we kind of flourish. Basketball season is when we really get to hit a lot of topics and get a lot of views.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure to have your Twitter down in the description as well as a link to keepingitheel.com. Definitely check out. If you haven't noticed by now, if you're a Tar Heel fan listening to this podcast, you've probably heard of and read several articles from keepingitheel.com as well as from Blake himself. One question I've been asking everybody coming on the podcast lately, Blake, have you watched the national championship game since last April?
No, and I won't.
All right, we'll keep it right there. There's no need to explain to many of us. I ventured through, and it was almost as difficult the second time as first time, but I do feel like it helped me heal a little bit. But yeah, jumping right in, before we get to Maui, obviously we have the Hawaii game that they played in Honolulu. Blake, did you stay up? This is the one that started at 1 a.m. Eastern time. Did you stay up and watch it?
I did. I stayed up and I did the recap after it too. So by the time I hit the sack that night, it was about 3 a.m. So I was tired, but it was worth it. It was a good game, and it was a good kind of a primer to Maui. And, the Tar Heels really did as expected. They took care of business, and they won that one and really got off to a good start during their trip.
Yeah, and this is the one where the commentator said that the Hawaii coach or team, or whoever's in charge of it, didn't allow the Tar Heels to come in for a shoot-around. Obviously the weird time zone, let alone, start time as far as the East Coast, Tar Heels are concerned. It showed early, throwing just a few stats out there. Tony Bradley had I think this was his first double-double, right? The 10 points, 13 rebounds. Had he had one before he went out to Hawaii?
I think you're probably right on that. I don't have anything in front of me, but he's been consistent. But even more so since that game, he's been really good. And, certainly with the loss of Luke May, that game against Chattanooga, Bradley's been able to take more minutes. And because of that, we've seen how good he is and how solid he is. And I think he's even more than what we anticipated him being. I knew he was going to come in and be a contributor and be good, be a solid player right away. I didn't know how good. And I've personally been really impressed with his play thus far.
Yeah, I've definitely been on the Tony Bradley bandwagon since early. I mean, I didn't see a ton of his highlights coming in, but super impressed. I think he's outshined the hype, or I don't know if he had hype, but the expectations, like you said, since coming in. A couple other stats from the Hawaii game. Isaiah Hicks led us with 16 points. We had 5 guys in double figures. Probably the most surprising stat is that Joel Berry was not one of them. 2 points, 6 assists, 4 turnovers, 1 for 9 shooting. What do you attribute the down game for Joel in this one?
I don't put a lot of weight into it. He had a bad game, and it was really certainly so far his worst game. Now he followed it up with an 8-point game. He wasn't superb in that game either. But he just couldn't find the net, and there's going to be games like that. Most players aren't going to have a flawless season. So far, we've kind of seen Frank Mason do that with Kansas, but I expect he'll have a couple of games here and there where he doesn't play quite as well either. But certainly to this point, Joel Berry's been one of the best point guards in the country, and one of the most reliable outside of that game. And thankfully, that game we didn't need it. But I think that will be sort of the aberration. I think you can count on Barry giving you, 17 to 20 most nights, and he's shown that so far. And he's a guy that I think we can count on in most situations, especially clutch situations and at the free throw line.
So you don't put stock in it being an off game, and I'm totally with you there. It's one game, even if you say 2 games with the Chaminade game, and you said we didn't need him. Can we put any stock in that we can win without Joel having a great game, or is it simply because it's a Chaminade, a Hawaii, a mid-major school at best?
No, I think we can win without him, but I don't want to try. Certainly when he's playing optimally, we are a better team. And I don't want to see what it's like with, the supporting cast having to be the ones to make up for Joel having a bad game. Now, we did see that last year, obviously, with Marcus Page. He struggled mightily for most of the season. But you had a guy there, Joel Berry, to sort of make up for that. Now, I don't trust the guys backing up Joel Berry as much as I trusted Berry backing up Page. And when I say backing up, with respect to the fact that they played at the same time, but in terms of production, I think, if we were to play a Kansas or certainly a Duke when it's fully healthy, Kentucky, I don't want to find out what we look like without Joel Berry. But I do think it's encouraging that we've got, 5, 6 guys scoring double figures every single game.
Yeah, and not even double figures, but the other freshman in this game, Brandon Robinson, had 5 points, one of them being a 3-pointer. Seventh Woods had 7 points, in this game. Even Kenny Williams came off the bench on this one, 6 points. You mentioned Luke May's injury. Before we go any further here, he didn't play in the Hawaii game, didn't play at all at Maui. Is there any update that we know on Luke May's injury? How bad it is, when he'll come back, anything like that?
Yeah, I wrote an article a few hours ago actually with updates to that. Roy Williams talked about last night on his radio show that May did practice some yesterday. They anticipated practicing today, but they'll know more tomorrow. If I had to guess, I would guess that he doesn't play simply because I think they'll err on the side of caution, but I could be wrong. That's completely a guess. Obviously it wasn't a break, it was just a sprain, but it has caused him some discomfort, and it's taken a little while to heal. But the fact that he is practicing again is a good sign. And even if he doesn't play against Indiana, he will be playing the next game. I can't see any reason he'd sit beyond that. Yeah,
and I mean, we said it all a bunch last year, and Marcus was hurt and even Theo this year with other guys stepping up. Obviously, Luke's not in that position, but I think it's even good for our other 3 big guys to know that they can have a rotation. We know Isaiah's not going to foul out every game this year. Tony Bradley getting those big minutes. Kennedy Meeks getting big-time minutes. Obviously, we know he's going to get in minutes, but just the fact that those 3 know they can kind of hold down the fort. We can throw Justin Jackson at the 4 for a few minutes if we need to buy time. Do you buy that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what you said is correct. We've done different things so far. We have played small ball at times. We've had Justin play at the 4. And then there's times where obviously Bradley's just made up for the minutes and he's taken more, and that's how he's been able to get in there and be so productive and show what he can do. I like Luke May being in that rotation because it does help give guys like Kenny Meeks and Isaiah Hicks a breather. And, he's never going to be a star, and that's no slight to him. He's just not the Tyler Hansbrough, Sean May, John Henson.
I think what's so big for this team, I think, is so many people know their role already. I mentioned last year about Nate Britt just being the ultimate kind of role player and team player, taking whatever role he needs to play, starter, bench player, backup, whatever, and running with it. It seems like this team just kind of has that down so early in the season, and much to why we're playing so well.
Absolutely. No, I think guys absolutely know their role, and credit to Roy Williams and the staff and to the players for that level of maturity and being okay with what your role is and how many minutes you're going to get, and that you may not always get a shot, but when you do, you take advantage of it. And they really do seem to have that down early in the season.
All right, so I don't think there's too much more to say. I guess we should maybe say, just in case anybody missed it, but we did beat Hawaii 83-68. Again, very early in the morning on the East Coast, where a lot of Tar Heel fans are watching. Chaminade, again, something I said last week is this, compared to last couple of years where Roy always just seemed to have to talk about picking up the intensity and getting guys to play intense, especially in these early season, I don't know, cupcake or whatever you want to say about the non-conference schedule. It's something he hasn't said this year. Chaminade was kind of the first instance I thought we saw kind of a lack of intensity or, coming out of the gate strong for the Tar Heels. Did you see that at all? And what would you attribute that to, if anything?
Well, I don't even know if I'd go so far as to say it was lack of intensity, but Chaminade does have some shooters. And Chaminade, no disrespect to Chaminade again, but they don't have a whole lot to lose when it comes to playing a team like North Carolina. You've got everything to gain and very little to lose, because if you lose, everyone expects it. If you win, you're going to Disney World, right, and everybody's talking about you.
Yeah, there's a reason that they don't mind going 0-3 or whatever it is in most Maui tournaments.
Well, sure, and look where they play. They get to lose, and then they go to the beach. But no, they had a lot of guys shooting off the beginning of that game. And you can't do much about that. We need to guard the three better in certain circumstances for sure. But eventually we picked it up and we did what we needed to do, and we kind of wore them down with our style of play. But certainly, to what you said, our intensity has been better this year, and I do like the fact that Roy isn't having to address it every single game and talk about we had to make adjustments at halftime with our intensity and pick it up in the second half. We're doing much better this year in that regard.
Yeah, so again, this one was fairly late. I believe this one started at like 11:30 Eastern, and again, late game. I thought maybe I was only going to stay up for about half of it, and hopefully we'd have a blowout. I don't think it was quite a blowout by half. I did end up staying up for the whole thing. We ended up winning 104-61, so it definitely took care of business. And like you'd expect against, I think Chaminade's like a D2 school, correct? You know that for sure?
Yeah.
I know they're lower level, right? Yeah.
Well, and another thing is that Chaminade has hosted all 33 of these tournaments, so they're the only participant in every single tournament. I think they've only won like twice. I know they won against Texas some years back, and I think in 2012 when the Tar Heels were last there, they won against Texas, and then they beat another big time school at one point. I can't remember.
Well, they also beat Ralph Sampson's Virginia, like number 1 ranked or number
Virginia,
2 ranked or whatever they were at the time. But
you're right, yeah. So like I said, they don't have a whole lot to lose,
right,
but everything to gain.
Right. And like expected, we pounded it inside. Isaiah Hicks led us with 22 points. Kennedy Meeks, 20 points, 10 rebounds. Tony Bradley had 14 points, 8 rebounds. So like we should, pounded in. Again, Joel, we mentioned, only had 8 points, but again, not needed, and definitely bounced back, as we'll talk about in the next 2 games.
Well, and maybe even more impressive stat was that Isaiah Hicks had 22 points to lead all scorers with the 6 rebounds and 0 fouls. So he's showing us early in the season that he's playing aggressively but smarter basketball. He's only had 4 fouls in 1 game so far, and he's only averaging about 2.5 a game.
Right.
That's a big adjustment and a big improvement from last year.
Right, and it says a lot about who he is as a kid. He's a smart kid, and he even mentioned himself last year he came in and felt he had to play with the intensity and really pick it up. And this year he's got to be a little bit smarter, and it looks like he's adjusted quite easily. So I don't know, anything else on the Chaminade game?
No, we took care of business. We did exactly what we thought, and then kind of got us ready. I think kind of set the tone for the rest of the tournament. Certainly.
Yes. One other person I guess that I would like to mention in the Chaminade game is Stillman White. Came in with some, I wouldn't even say big time minutes, but big time plays when he came in the first. Seems like he, we talked about lack of intensity or just kind of settling in or whatever, but he seemed like the guy to come in and settle us in.
Yeah, he was really good. Well, and Stillman White is a guy to keep in mind. If this guy was playing at a number of other schools, he could start and he could play serious minutes. But he wants to go to Carolina. This is where he wanted to go. He took his 2-year mission trip and he came back. And but he's a really solid basketball player. People don't remember that when he played in the NCAA tournament last year, he had I think 13 assists and no turnovers. So while he couldn't, Marshall was able to do in that NCAA tournament. In terms of the skill and the passing ability, he's still very solid. And when he's in there, he's a guy that I at least trust to take care of the basketball and to make the right decisions.
For sure. Yeah, it's crazy to think, what is that, like 4 years ago now. He was playing in the Elite Eight as a starter, and yeah, he easily could. So many kids transfer these days. He easily could have came back and said, I want more minutes. And again, it speaks to this team and the roles that they've settled into and accepted and done so well, thrived in, I guess is a good word to put it. But got a little bit of change of pace going up against Oklahoma State. I knew the pace was, watching Oklahoma State's game in the previous day on the Maui tournament, I knew this was going to be a fun one to watch. I just didn't expect that we would do this well. And it probably even more so defensively, holding them to 75 points while we scored 107. We had 6 guys in double figures, as well as Kenny Williams that had 9, so close to 7 guys. Joel Berry bounced back, like we said, 24 points. Justin Jackson 22. Isaiah 13. Tony Bradley at 13 again. Nate Britt had 12 in this game. I mean, everybody was clicking. This has to be, show everybody why you don't run with North Carolina if they haven't learned the past decades, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately for Oklahoma State, that's the way that they're going to play, and they can't change their style of play based on who their competition is, because that's not who they are. So we knew going into that game that we were going to run. They were going to run with us, and unfortunately for them, they only had one Jawan Evans, and he's one of the best point guards in the country, and he scored almost half their points. But as good as he is, he wasn't enough to do anything, any serious damage to the Tar Heels. And we gave up, we gave him his 30 points or what have you. But nobody else did a whole lot of damage, and we certainly took care of business and ran him off the court.
And this is the game that, showed everybody, and including Jay Billis, how serious of a contender the Tar Heels are. And I think I saw you either an article or tweeted out how much, I think you were on right before the predictions podcast. We both kind of were thinking Sweet 16, Elite 8 kind of level. How much has it bumped up the confidence in this team for you?
I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I've almost sort of been doing it without trying to lately. The way they've played, and I know it's only 7 games, I consider myself pretty realistic and pretty down to earth when I think about the prospect of 1 year to the next, what a team's going to do. But the way they're playing so far, I'm as optimistic about it as ever. I think they have an opportunity to do what they did last year. And part of that is because typically at the beginning of a UNC season, we see a few weird, disappointing losses with, like you said, a lack of intensity or sort of just a discombobulated effort of weirdness, and Roy Williams trying to switch around lineups and see what works. And we really haven't seen that this year. Even when he does use different lineups, it's worked really well. And I don't want to say that it's addition by subtraction, because that would sort of come off in a disrespectful manner. But we seem to be better without Bryce Johnson and Marcus Page. And I highlighted that actually in an article today as well. That I think that people are just doing better in their roles without relying on those guys so heavily. The things that we tended to do last year was we would just wait around for Marcus Page to make a play. And with the struggle that he was having shooting the ball, that was probably the worst thing we could do. And we kept hoping that he'd come out of that slump, and it really never happened. And then at that point, it became, well, just pass the ball to Bryce. And while that worked most of the time, there are still times when you need to have an all-around game where everybody can contribute. And I think that's what we're doing this year.
Yeah, and there was definitely times last year where we just couldn't get Bryce the ball. And I think even the national championship, there was a big stretch that everybody talked about, a 7-8 minute stretch where he didn't touch the ball or did very little with it. And yeah, there's just nobody you can key on this year in this rotation that we have. I mean, we have shooters out there. We have guys that are driving. We have, really everybody that we need stepping up. So, again, a 180 in pace play when we jump into the championship against Wisconsin. Again, something I kind of predicted. Tar Heel fans still said, well, we're going to impose our will on them. We're going to run them out of the gym. Didn't quite happen that way. The pace was as I expected. We ended up still a comfortable win, 71-56 against Wisconsin. I think we said, 6 or 7 guys close to double figures the previous game. In this game, kind of a weird stat, we have 4 starters in double figures. Tony Bradley off the bench with 6 points, and then Shea Rush got a late bucket. But really, 6 guys scored, and you could really say about 5 guys without that late bucket from Shea Rush. Is this frustrating to watch to you, or is it more, I believe, one of the comments saying, showing, or even Roy talking about after the game, showing that we can win at any pace and any score?
Yeah, to me, it's more encouraging. Some, I think, were disappointed that we couldn't impose our will. But to me, it's far more important to be able to let the pace of play be determined by another team and see how we can do. Now, if we can make every team run, fine, but that's just not realistic. There are times where you're not going to be able to use your offense to change the pace of their play. And they dictated the pace of the game, and we played it better than them. And to me, that's a really good thing, because you come up with a team, a Big Ten team, for instance, a Wisconsin, Michigan State, those type teams that play lower scoring games with, stifling defense in the NCAA tournament, and you can't impose your will, that's a game you lose.
Right, and it's easier for teams to slow down. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like, you can get out and run all you want, but if the other team, gets the rebound or takes the ball out of the net and takes all 30 seconds to take a shot and, whatever, there's only so much that you can do to speed up a game. Whereas slowing it down, it's a lot easier to do that for teams. And Wisconsin has definitely had a lot of practice at slowing games down. But yeah, Joel Berry, again, great game. Shot 9 for 12 from the field. Just, so efficient. 22 points. Justin Jackson, 12 points. Isaiah Hicks, 14 points. Kennedy Meeks, 15 points. I don't know. I don't think we can depend on those guys. When there's 4 of them, it's not like we're really depending on them. That's what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, well, we've been so efficient everywhere on the court. And the front court, to me, has been the most impressive, because I expected that our guards would be pretty solid this year. We've got a good core of guards, but the front court was what I was really concerned with, namely foul trouble with Isaiah Hicks and how effective can Kennedy Meeks be. And so far, Kennedy Meeks, in my estimation, has had the best 7-game stretch he's ever had. And in that stretch, I think he's averaging 13.7 points, 10.7 rebounds. So averaging a double-double to this point, and he's one of the best offensive rebounds in the country through those 7 games. If he can keep that play up, Isaiah Hicks can be as effective as he's been and stay on the court, and then keep a guy like Tony Bradley getting a nice steady flow of minutes and get him acclimated to the college game the way that he seems to be doing so well, we should be sitting pretty well by March. And I honestly, at this point, I think we have a chance to compete for the ACC title, which pretty much everyone had counted us out for at the beginning of the season.
All right, so the big question, last 2 times that Roy has won the Maui Championship, and the last 3 times the Tar Heels have won the Maui Championship, they have gone on to the Final Four. And then obviously, Roy, those are the 2 years we got that won the championship in 2005 and 2009. It's expected now, right? It's destiny. We're going to be in Phoenix for the Final Four, right?
Right, yeah. I answered this question last night to somebody else, and I said, the last 3 times we've gone to the Final Four, and both the times with Roy Williams, we've won the title. And I'd love to count on that, but I put 0 stock into it. And I'd love in 4 years to be quoting this stat still and saying every time we've ever done it, we've gone, to the Final Four. But it's too much of a crapshoot. And to me, this Maui Invitational wasn't quite as strong as others have been. I'm really, and I've been saying this every day, I'm really waiting for tomorrow night to see how we play against Indiana. And I'd like to see James Blackman play, and I think he will. And I'd like to see him up to full strength as much as possible, simply because not because I want to lose, and not because I want to risk, blemishing the record, but because I want to see a real test on that record. I think Wisconsin's a solid team, and I think they'll, maybe be a Sweet 16 team or something like that, but I don't think they're as good as an Indiana. And I want to see how the Tar Heels react, right, against guys like OG Anunoby, Thomas Bryant and James Blackman, and a team like that that's a legitimate top 10 team. That I think that loss the other day was really an aberration, and I think it's something that you can't really expect for the rest of the season. Indiana's a good team, and this should be a really good barometer for where we're at.
Yeah, I'm sure Roy would like to say in 4 years that we've won every time they've won the Maui Championship. But I guarantee that he will not bring that up or talk about it in any press conferences if somebody brings it up either. He's not going to have any of that. So yeah, you talk about Indiana, you talk about how strong they are. Yeah, hopefully Blackman. If people don't watch, Indiana is not. They played last night and they won, but are coming off of a loss at Fort Wayne, which they did not expect to be a loss when they scheduled that game. So they definitely have, and they were ranked ahead of us. They were the number 3 team. That's why we moved up when they lost. And you mentioned Blackman being one of their better teams. What's the key, and do you predict a Tar Heel win?
I'll say we win, but I wouldn't be shocked to see it go either way. I think that if Blackman plays, which, like I said, I anticipate him doing, and if he plays effectively, we've got to stay on him as tight as possible on the perimeter because he's one of the premier shooting guards in the country. He's a terrific scorer, just a natural ability to get the ball in the hoop. But at the same time, their inside game, their front court is fantastic. They've got 3 first-round draft picks on that team and 2 lottery picks. There's no reason that team shouldn't compete for a Final Four. So this will be a real test, and then this test obviously will be followed up with one in Las Vegas against Kentucky. So it's those 2 games really in the first part of our schedule that I think will really kind of tell us where we're at. But certainly tomorrow night it's going to be a hostile environment. No love lost between these 2 teams. They've had their share of sort of emotional bouts in the past. One of them being Sean May committing to the Tar Heels, and then when he went back there for the first time, the Burger King incident where the fans were making fun of him and calling him Burger King. And then just in recent years we lost Troy Williams in a recruiting battle to Indiana. So
and Tyler Zeller is in there as well. Tyler Zeller and Cody Zeller and.
Yeah, Cody Zeller went there when Tyler had already come to UNC. So, yeah, there's a lot of history between these 2 teams, considering the fact that they don't play very often. And I think it'll be fun. I'm going to be nervous. I'll be on the edge of my seat the whole time, I'm sure. And I would be shocked to see a lopsided victory here on either side. I think it'll be very close.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, I don't remember who it was, one of the national guys doing an Indiana game is the thing about Indiana is all their players kind of do the same things. And they have, like the stretch 4. And to me, it's going to be guarding that 3-point line. Can we get out when they space the floor? Can we get out and guard them and guard that 3-point shot? Because we know we've struggled with that in the past. And hopefully they shoot the ball well, and hopefully yet we can, defend them and come out with a victory. Again, that would be kind of another stepping stone, and proving this year is going to be different than past years in some of those trends we've seen. So, yeah, after Indiana, we have Radford. I don't know that there's a whole lot we're going to say about the Radford game. It should be a win. It should be a welcome home back to Chapel Hill for the Tar Heels. As far as anybody not following the schedule, the Indiana game is tomorrow night on ESPN, 9 p.m. Eastern start. The Radford game is Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern in Chapel Hill. For TV, it says RSN. I don't know what that is. I'm guessing it'll be on ESPN3 or the Watch ESPN app. For those of us out of network to be able to watch. And something we haven't even mentioned, and I've been kind of behind the ball as far as the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Obviously, that's why we're playing Indiana. The only other T teams I know that are playing is Duke and Michigan State because it's been on the commercials so much for ESPN. Is there any other games that you know of? Have you been following the ACC Big Ten Challenge close enough to give us any other highlights?
I mean, obviously the 2 main games that anybody cares about are Michigan State, Duke, and obviously Indiana and North Carolina, the other games. Virginia Tech plays tonight. Virginia Tech is a team that Buzz Williams has going in the right direction. They're worth watching. I think they'll be a tournament team this year, and I think eventually he'll have them competing sort of in the top, 5 to 6, maybe 7 teams in the ACC, which for Virginia Tech is a huge step because we're talking about a team that for years has struggled to even crack the top 10. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of games that I think are going to get people too interested in this tournament. One thing I will say is that Grayson Allen is not going to be playing tonight, apparently with hurt toe. So that's one more to add to the shelf for Duke. So you've got a completely banged up Michigan State team and a completely banged up Duke team. This would have been a fantastic game at the beginning of the season. Been healthy, but as it is, it's almost like a hospital ward, just lining guys up and going against each other tonight.
Was it announced that he's officially not playing? I know the 3 freshmen are.
He's not playing. That's the latest I've heard. So after this and make sure that's correct. But as far as I know, he's not playing. So to add that to Bolden and Harry Giles and Jason Tatum, I mean, they've got a really banged up team. But even having said that, they've still got Emil Jefferson, Luke Kennard. They've got a good freshman point guard in Frank Jackson. So, I still think Duke wins it. But it's certainly not going to have the firepower and the excitement that it would have had some time ago.
Right. Yeah, maybe ESPN can stop showing those commercials finally about the big game tonight. But all right, we'll take that as breaking news here with Grayson Allen out, and obviously you don't want to see anybody hurt, but yeah, Duke can afford it if anybody can. So that's about all we got. I don't know, Blake, you got anything else to wrap up Maui Championship, ACC Big Ten Challenge going forward for the Heels?
We're 7-0. What's not to like? If we win tomorrow night, we've got a bit of an easy schedule until we face Kentucky December 17th. So, I think if we beat Indiana, we should be undefeated going against Kentucky, and that could be 1 versus 2 at that time.
Yeah, 1 versus 3 at worst. Right, it'd be 1 versus 3 at worst.
That's a matchup. One that you're going to see some of the best freshmen in the country for Kentucky, and kind of a compelling storyline with one team that's full of upperclassmen, the other team a whole bunch of underclassmen, a bunch of freshmen like normal Kentucky. So I would love to see that game be number 1 versus number 2 to determine the top team in the country.
For sure. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching, listening, however you're taking in the podcast. Be sure to spread it to your fellow Tar Heel fans and friends, family members, whoever it is. Share it out there. It's definitely appreciated. Blake, I want to thank you for coming on again. The podcast, you're always welcome back for another episode talking Tar Heel fans. And yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And until we speak again next week, go Heels.
Go Heels.
All right, you couldn't hear.